Hi, it's James here from Food Matters, and welcome to this special interview with a close friend of mine, Chris Wark. Chris's story about how he beat cancer is just phenomenal. He is going to be featuring in our new documentary, which will be the third Food Matters film that we have done. And in that film, he talks about his personal story plus his transformation. And today he's going to be sharing with us how the power of plants helped him heal his body, and how access to certain information just at the right time helped him integrate a lot of this knowledge into his life, especially around diet change, and how that became really the catalyst for helping him transform his health and really turn his life from something that was, quite a dire and fearful and worrisome time to something that's turned into a joy and a passion of his. And now he travels the world speaking to people about his experiences, and we've caught up in some wonderful places such as Texas and London, and so make sure to check it out to see if you can see him live. His website is called chrisbeatcancer.com. And Chris, hey, how you doing?
What's up, James? That was like the best intro I think I've ever gotten, and totally unrehearsed.
Oh, great.
So good.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So look, I feel a little bit like kindred spirits with you a little bit. We're a similar age somewhat, although my journey started with my father's transformation, and your journey was very much a personal transformation. We could spend an hour talking about your story, but maybe if you could give people the Cliff Note version to start with, and obviously they're going to be able to refer to other interviews inside FMTV, plus also the new film that's coming out. But tell me what it was like, and tell me some of the critical information that you received that helped you get that insight specifically into how plants helped you with this transformation.
So I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 years old. This was December 2003, 2 days before Christmas. And I was a very typical cancer patient. When I say typical, I mean I was just clueless, had no idea really what cancer was. I'd never had any friends or family go through it. And so I was rushed into treatment like pretty much every other cancer patient. A lot of cancer patients, they're put into treatment within days of their diagnosis. I mean, they don't have time to think about their life or what's about to happen to them. It's just rush. Like, oh, you got this diagnosis, you need surgery right away. You need chemo. We're going to start chemo tomorrow, like this kind of stuff. And so that's exactly the position I was in. They said, we got to get you in surgery right away and get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. And they were going to have me in surgery the day before Christmas. And I was like, hey, can I not be in the hospital on Christmas? So we postponed it a week. I went in on December 30th. They took out a third of my large intestine. They took out this golf ball sized tumor. And when I woke up, they said, hey, it's worse than we thought. We thought you were probably stage 2. Turns out you're stage 3C, which is almost stage 4. That means it would spread to the lymph nodes. It's metastatic disease, which is a whole new ball game, right? When you step from stage 2 to 3, it's a completely new ball game, because stage 1 and 2, highly curable with surgery. Stage 3 and 4, not so much. So they said, look, you need the next step is going to be 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. And at that point, it was just like, man, okay, I guess this is my life now. And I guess I'm going to be be that chemo patient that I see, out in the world sometimes or on TV or whatever. And that was pretty depressing, right? Pretty depressing thought. 2 things happened in the hospital that I'd say started me on this journey from the typical cancer patient to the atypical cancer patient. And the first thing was the very first meal that they served me in the hospital was a sloppy Joe. The sloppy Joe is an American food that you may or may not have in Australia, but it's basically mystery meat in some kind of tomato sauce that they ladle out of a giant cauldron onto a burger bun. And the only place you can get sloppy joes are summer camp, the military, prison, and to my surprise, if you have cancer in the hospital.
Unbelievable.
So, they set this tray in front of me. There's a sloppy Joe on it. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. Why are they serving this to sick people? This is the worst food I can think of. And I knew the difference between health food and junk food. Like I wasn't totally clueless. I grew up with a mom who was into health food and shopped at health food stores and would buy stuff like wheat germ and sprouts and kefir. And I worked at a health food store called Wild Oats that got bought out by Whole Foods. So I understood that world. And so, yeah, it was just a shock to me that I just always assumed that the healthcare industry was, had some like sense of health and healthy food and healthy eating and living and stuff, right? But no, right? They're totally separate. Healthcare is over here, health food is over here. Never the twain shall meet. So, the next thing that happened in the hospital that kind of kept the wheels turning was the day I was supposed to check out. My surgeon came in, we had a little consultation, and I was just asking him, hey, are there any foods I need to avoid? Because I didn't want to eat the wrong thing and screw it up. I was just conscientious about, I don't want to eat hot sauce and melt the stitches or, whatever. So I asked him and he says, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. So I'm like, okay, that's it, right? The guy who's cut my intestines open, I assumed might have some expert insight on gastrointestinal health, has nothing to say about nutrition. Just who cares? Doesn't matter. So those are two red flags, right? Two red flags. And I didn't come into cancer knowing oh, if I got cancer, this is what I do, right? I mean, cancer wasn't on my radar. I was 26. And so, like I said, I'd never lost anyone to cancer, never even had a person I knew closely diagnosed with cancer. So I go home from the hospital and I'm laying on the couch, recovering, and I'm trying to get off pain medicine. And I'm thinking about my life and my future and just the idea of poisoning my way back to health did not make sense, right? We're going to give you this really super toxic stuff and it's going to make you better. I couldn't get my brain around that. And instinctively, I had this fear that, and I don't want to even, fear is almost the wrong word. I mean, there was fear involved, but something in my intuition was saying, don't do that, right? And it's not I watched my mom go through it. I didn't have any frame of reference other than my instincts were really telling me don't do that. And I just sensed that it would really, really hurt me bad. I knew how vulnerable I was physically. I was basically emaciated, weak, you just had major surgery. And I just knew this is going to be really bad. So I prayed about it, and my wife and I prayed together, and I was just like, God, I don't know what to do. If there's something besides chemo, please show me. And it was just a sincere prayer of, I was just reaching out, asking for help, and I was desperate and I was humble and sincere. And I was just like, I don't know, help me. And 2 days later, I got a book. And that book was written by a man who was diagnosed with colon cancer back in the 1970s and had refused all treatment and gone on a raw food diet with lots of juicing. And in about a year, his tumor was gone. And I'm reading his story, and it's just this is insane. This makes so much sense to me. And he was making a broader case, which was that the reason we're all so sick is because we're eating an unhealthy diet. We're eating tons of processed food, junk food, artificial food, and way too much meat and dairy. And it's all contributing to disease, not just cancer, but heart disease, diabetes. So I'm like, man, that makes so much sense. What would happen if I stopped eating all this junk food and processed food and meat and dairy and went to this pure diet of raw fruits and vegetables straight from the earth, organic, of course. And I got excited about that idea. To me, I looked at it like an adventure, right? And I really just couldn't wait to see what would happen if I did that. Meanwhile, my family, most of the people around me thought I'd lost my mind and were trying to talk me out of it. And there was a lot of pressure to just do the conventional treatment. And no one understood at the time that I was taking these radical steps to change my life. And I'd had this epiphany that the way I was living was killing me. This is what I tell all cancer patients. Like, you need to go ahead and assume that the way you're living is killing you. And what that means, the ramification of that belief, right, is that you got to change your whole life, right? There's not a magic pill. There's no magic bullet. Most conventional treatments don't cure metastatic cancer. And you can't just go chasing after some weird alternative therapy. Like, you need to turn your life upside down and take a look at it and be like, okay, like, what am I doing wrong? And for a lot of people, it's a lot of things. They're doing a lot of things wrong. But the good news about it, it's not like, I'm not trying to point fingers and make people feel bad and blame them and shame them. The good news behind the I guess you could say the painful truth, right? The good news is you can change. You have the power to change your life, and the decisions you make today affect your health tomorrow. And the cooler thing about that is we have all the science now on cancer survival and how diet and lifestyle impacts cancer survival. And so that got me on this just crazy, like, off the beaten path journey to wellness.
But that's radical self-responsibility, Chris. I mean, most people, when they get cancer, they say, well, my mom had it, my mom's mom had it, maybe it's genetic, there's nothing I can do, and there's that sense of giving up. But whereas you took, in essence, your power back and said, no, I'm going to take responsibility for this. And I guess, was this insight in some of the work that you were reading as well?
It was. And what you just said is a rampant infectious problem in the world of cancer. And that problem is victimization. Because cancer patients are told, okay, before they go to the doctor, their instincts and intuition are telling them there's something wrong in your life. Okay. But they go to the doctor and the doctor says, no, it's nothing you did. It's probably genetic. And because nothing you did contributed to your disease, there's nothing you can do to help yourself. And you feel it, right? You feel how disempowering that is, and how much that turns someone into a victim like that, right? And now their only hope is the treatment that the doctor has to offer. That's your only hope. And then they go even further and say, and by the way, you just go home and eat whatever you want. Burgers, pizza, ice cream. They tell them to eat ice cream because they need the calories. Because they know chemo will make them sick and they're not going to want to eat. So when they do eat, they want to eat really high calorie food. So, I mean, it's just a perpetuating, like, sort of vicious cycle that a cancer patient gets in mentally and physically, right? So they keep abusing themselves dietarily, and mentally they think, well, it's not my fault. Nothing I can do, right? Just bad luck. So that's pretty infuriating to me. And, it's taken me time to, like, understand these things after talking to hundreds and hundreds of patients and in the last 14 years. But that's what happens to almost every person. And the craziest thing of all is we know that 70 to 95% of cancers are caused by diet, lifestyle, and environment. Okay? And I can make a case, and we may go into this, that stress is the underlying cause of a lot of those, right? It's underneath those. But diet, lifestyle, environment, published scientific research, these are the major causes of cancer. That means it is our fault, okay? Your diet and lifestyle, those are your choices, whether you knew it or not, right? Most of us are ignorant. We didn't realize. So not trying to blame or shame anybody, but look, hey, you've been eating junk food, stuff that promotes cancer and disease, you get cancer. Hey, okay, like, this was your fault, you contributed, but now you can change. That's the good news. Same with smoking and drinking, right? Cigarettes and alcohol, they're known cancer causers. If you've been smoking and drinking for decades and you get cancer, and, are you surprised? Is your doctor going to tell you, you've got cancer because you're a smoker? No. The doctors won't tell you that.
Now you started really focusing on one of the first points of your pillars to wellness, which was food. I mean, it's a very tangible component of the healing journey. And you've spoken about how, you've got to take responsibility for your health and all these sort of things. And for you, that was the first point to start at. When you took this exploratory journey into raw food, which is what you're talking about here, how did you start? I mean, did you start with juices? Did you start with a salad? Did you just eat whole foods? Or did you try raw food cooking classes with spiralizers and dehydrators? I mean, where did it start for you, and what did you discover in that process?
My raw food journey started like this. I had a book that was telling me I needed to eat a raw food diet and juice carrots. Okay. So I was like, all right, who sells juicers, right? So I bought a juicer and I went to Whole Foods and just like loaded up the cart full of vegetables and some fruit. And I got home and like, there was like some suggestions in the book, like, make a big salad or whatever. So I kind of started with that. And then I started looking into like raw food recipe books, and I was trying to navigate the world of like raw eating. There was nothing on the internet at the time. And what I realized was a lot of raw food cookbooks, like you were talking about, spiralizers and making raw noodles and dehydrators and all this kind of stuff. It required a lot of time and effort. And as I looked into a lot of raw food recipes, I was looking at the ingredients and I was like, well, there's only like 5 ingredients in this. And I want to get as much food variety in my body as possible every day. So I had to kind of think it through, and I came to this very simple strategy, which was I'm going to make these giant salads and I'm going to eat them every day for lunch and dinner. And it's not like a big bowl of lettuce. It's all of the most potent anti-cancer vegetables: broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, onions, mushrooms, garlic, peppers, and sauerkraut, and then topping it with turmeric, curcumin, a lot of herbs and spices, oregano, cayenne pepper, garlic powder, apple cider vinegar, olive oil, right? And and it was amazing. It was just delicious.
You just wanted to cover all your bases, right?
It's yes, exactly.
How do I get it all in there?
Yeah, how do I get every vegetable in my body, right? Every day. And so I had this sort of idea that like, I'm going to try to overdose on nutrition. That's what I'm going to try to do and see what happens. Like, I'm going to give my body this overabundance of good stuff that I didn't understand scientifically at the time. It was all purely instinct driven, but I'm just going to pump in all this good stuff every day, and let my body use what it needs. And, hopefully I'm helping my body repair, regenerate, detoxify. I'm changing the internal environment from one that is pro-cancerous to one that is not hospitable to cancer. And so it was very simple. So every morning I'd get up and I'd make about 64 ounces of vegetable juice. It started off with straight carrot juice, and then I started adding things like beets and ginger root and celery and cucumber, right? And just kind of like making sort of a more balanced veggie juice, but making 64 ounces of juice, drinking it throughout the day.
Vegetable based though, which is an important component.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't putting any fruit in it. Although I'm totally cool with like green apple and lemon. Like they're amazing in the juice, and I love to put those in juice now. But at the time, I wasn't putting any fruit in it, and it was all vegetables. And there are even people that think that carrot juice and beet juice is too sweet or something, but it really is nonsense. And I drank that throughout the day. I'd usually juice through the morning, maybe have some fresh fruit like a grapefruit or a green apple, just, as a snack, giant salad for lunch, and a fruit smoothie in the afternoon as a snack. Like I was buying organic frozen berries. So blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, throw them in the blender with some almond milk or a fresh coconut and a banana, blend it up. It's like absolutely delicious. We know that berries are the most potent anti-cancer fruits. So that was a snack, and then dinner was another giant salad. And then the next day, repeat, right? So I did that over and over and over. And some people probably hearing this like, oh, I could never do that. I could never eat the same thing every day. And it actually simplified my life so much. Like when I went to the grocery store, I knew exactly what to buy, and I wasted nothing. everything I bought got eaten. And that was like for the first time in my life, everything I bought, I ate. And it became so simple and efficient. I really just loved it. And plus, it was delicious. Like I craved the salad. I ate it twice a day. It was delicious every time I ate it. The juices, made me feel good, gave me energy, and of course the fruit smoothie as well. And so I just created this really simple daily anti-cancer diet that I knew I could sustain, right? And that's the big key, because a lot of times when somebody embarks on a healthy diet, the biggest problem isn't their desire to eat healthy. The biggest problem is they just don't know what to eat, right? They kind of run out of ideas, or they don't plan ahead, and then they're hungry and they're like, okay, where's the nearest fast food, right? Because they didn't plan ahead. So I stopped eating out, obviously. Well, I'd still go hang out with friends and family, but I just eat before I go, right? It's like there's always a simple solution. If you just think it through, like you can figure out how to do this. And so, and I was eating all organic. I mean, pretty much 100% organic food. So I was just trying to eliminate any potential toxic exposure. And we did the whole sort of like house clean, where you throw out all the toxic house, cleaning stuff and the bath and body care stuff, and replaced it with natural, non-toxic brands. So it was just a systematic detoxification of my, diet and home environment. And
so I have a question now. So you stuck to this quite strict diet for I'm not sure how long, and then as your prognosis started to improve, how did you transition to, because that is quite an extreme cancer fighting diet. I mean, like you said, most people would freak out. How could I ever stick to something like that? I would say it depends on the motivation. Your motivation was, look, it's worse than we think. You could die here. And like you said in the interview for the film, I mean, your survival rate was barely better than a coin toss. I mean, so you had the motivation to stick to this and see it through. Incredible. At what point in time did you start to, I wouldn't say loosen up on that diet, but I'd imagine that how you eat now, I don't know, this is a question, is how you eat now different than how you ate then? And how has your diet evolved since that time?
Yeah. So it did evolve, and I modified it over time as I learned things. So the 100% raw food diet is a super powerful healing and detoxification diet, but it's not a good long-term diet. We know the healthiest, longest living people around the world, they're not raw foodists, right? They do eat cooked food too. So, but I stayed 100% raw for the first 90 days. And then we backed it down to about 85% raw. So somewhere, 80, 85%. But basically I was eating some cooked food with dinner. So juicing all day, giant salad, fruit smoothie, giant salad again for dinner, but then also adding a sweet potato or some brown rice or some quinoa or maybe some Ezekiel bread. So there were a few things that the nutrition that I worked with at the time suggested I eat, and he even suggested I eat a few servings of animal protein per week. Now, at the time, I didn't convert to a 100% raw vegan diet because I wanted to be a vegan. Right? I converted because I wanted to live. So, my motivation had nothing to do with saving animals, although the animal industry is horrible and cruel, and I don't endorse it at all. But at the time, I was like, look, I just want to live. Like, if living means I need to kill and eat raccoons all day, I will do that. Okay, right? So there was I had no attachment at all to animal rights or anything. I was just like, I just want to live. What do I need to do? So anyway, so he said, look, I was super underweight. I felt great, but I looked really bad. I have a high metabolism, and I was 130 pounds. I was 6'2", and I still am 6'2".
So you didn't shrink. You didn't shrink after all that raw food.
I didn't shrink or grow. But I looked like a skeleton, right? And I was orange. My skin was orange from all the carrot juice. So people were like super worried about me. They're like, he's like bone skinny, his skin's yellow, like he must be dying. And I'm like, I'm great. But I looked in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I don't look good. I don't want to, I didn't being that skinny. So anyway, we figured out I need more cooked food just so I could get more calories in. And so we added cooked vegetables, and he said, why don't you eat a serving of salmon or maybe some lamb a couple times a week? And I'm like, Okay. If you think it'll help, sure. So we added a little bit of animal protein back. And but I
You're
stayed
talking about like 2 serves a week, like a very small amount, a
right.
couple of serves a week. So let's be clear on that. Yeah.
Correct. A couple servings a week. And for the next 2 years, that's the way it was. It's like 80% raw or maybe a little more, and cooked food at night, and then a couple servings of animal protein per week. And that was it. Now, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have added the animal protein. I don't think it helped. And I think it was a little bit risky because I've learned a lot about how animal protein can fuel cancer growth, because it raises hormone levels in your body, including IGF-1, which promotes cancer growth. It raises methionine, which is an amino acid that cancer cells need to survive. Red meat raises iron, which fuels cancer growth. And saturated fat fuels cancer growth. So all of those factors are in animal food. So it was a little bit risky. And in hindsight, his advice, wasn't that good.
Maybe you should have just stuck with the more cooked vegetable-based foods. Is that what you're suggesting? Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah, and that's absolutely what I recommend for people now. I just say, listen, if you need more calories, eat more cooked veggies, right? Raw food's amazing, but eat more cooked veggies. And I would really steer clear of the animal products for much longer until you're out of the clear.
Okay.
If you ever eat them again. So fast forward, what does my diet look like now? So now I still eat a plant-based diet, not a vegan. 1 meal a day typically is a raw meal. The other 2 are cooked. And I eat a serving of animal protein about twice a month. So it's very infrequent. But every once in a while, I might have a craving for something, and I just listen to my body, and I feel like, you know what? I'm kind of craving this right now. I'm going to have some. And studying populations around the world has helped me a lot too, because you're familiar with the blue zones and studies like that. And my focus now has shifted from healing cancer, which I got past, to longevity. And so now I'm like, okay, well, if I want to live a long, healthy life, I should probably imitate the longest living people in the world, right? And not listen to the gurus, right? Unless they're gurus who are studying the longest living people in the world.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm totally with you on this. I mean, these studies exist. They're here. They're on planet Earth right now. They've proven it over multiple generations, and there's different pockets of them around the world that have successfully done it in isolation. And there's common threads between them, but there's also differences. So it's a bit enlightening and a bit confusing in the same way, but it's definitely real information.
It's real information. Real people are in real pockets are living exceptionally long, healthy lives, free of most chronic modern diseases. So that's who I want to be. And in studying those people, I looked at those common threads, right? And one of the common threads is the plant-based diet. 95% plant-based on average is the way that longest living people eat. They're not paleo, they're not vegan, they're not keto, right? Yeah. They're not any of these dietary fads. Yeah. They're just eating a simple, very humble diet of whole foods from the earth. They're eating beans every day. Like legumes are a staple food in all the longest living populations. But they're eating beans, they're eating grains, they're eating fruit when it's in season. A lot of them eat local sort of like herbs and teas, and of course they grow vegetables. So lots of vegetables, obviously, and fruit. And depending on the region, they're eating different types of vegetables and fruit. It's fine. So so that was really encouraging and enlightening to me, and kind of helped me craft the way I eat now. And so the meat I do eat is more of just like a little bit of a hedge, right? So it's just kind of like, in case maybe there's something in there that I'm not getting enough of from vegetables or fruit, right? Couple servings a month, my bases are covered, right? It's not enough to hurt me, no way. And it might be a little bit helpful. And the one thing we don't know from the studies on the longest living people is the little amount of meat that they eat helping them, or is it not enough to hurt them? And no one can say either way. They're just like, we don't know. So that's my focus, the way I eat, the way I've eaten for years now. And really my message to the world is that, like, look, you don't have to take on a dietary identity. And that's really important, because like if you become a vegan, you're becoming something, right? You're taking on like a mantle, like an identity that has all these other implications with it, and all these rules that you have to conform to, and people you have to please, and whatever, right? And some people are just like, look, I just want to be healthy. Like, I don't want to, I don't really want to be in that club. And so same with vegetarianism, right? You're becoming something. And to me, I don't want to take on a dietary identity. I just want to eat healthy.
Yeah. And I think,
right?
I really agree with your mission, and one of those, I call it divorcing nutritional dogma. And I believe that potentially we should subscribe, this sounds a little strange, but to a new dogma, which is really qualitarianism, and become more concerned about the quality of food in comparison to how we label what we eat. And even if you think about, I've interviewed a lady that said she's paleo, but she eats 9 cups of vegetables a day. And I'm like, well, hang on, that's like plant-based with some small amount of animal products. I mean, like, so, and if I dissect a lot of these dietary philosophies, most of them agree that a lot of plants are beneficial. But then I want to ask you more specifically about some of the question I have about blue zones for you. So some of these people drink coffee, have bread, they maybe have wine with lunch. There's Sicilians, there's Abkhazians, there's Hunzans, there's Okinawans, there's Polynesian tribes. I mean, they're spread out.
Costa Ricans.
Yep. But I mean, let's talk about non-food elements as we wrap up, because I think that's a good place to finish. But on the food side, as someone who considers himself somewhat interested in nutrition for the last 15, 20 years, and developed a knowledge base speaking to experts like yourself and making films on this topic, I find that a little confusing, because they're doing things that I wouldn't really prescribe, and yet they're thriving on it. They're not doing anything nasty. They're not eating refined sugars, GMO foods, processed foods. No, but they're certainly having some things. Like, what's your take on that, and what's your sort of reasoning behind that?
Yeah, no, it's great. I thought that had those same thoughts, and really thought about it a lot. And so there are a lot of extrinsic factors to their health and longevity besides the diet, right? So the simple answer is, I think they're just doing so much good stuff, right? So many beneficial things that the potentially detrimental things, it's just not enough to hurt them, right? So we know coffee is controversial, right? But there's a fair amount of studies that say that coffee, prevents certain types of cancers, can be preventative. I'm not a coffee drinker. I prefer green tea. We know there's studies on, alcohol consumption and cancer, but the other factors besides their diet is a lot of these people groups are getting a lot of exercise, right? Not like gym exercise, right? But like they're walking a lot, they're working in their garden, they're in motion all day. They're getting a lot of fresh air because they're polluted. They're getting a lot of sunshine, and they have really strong social communities, right? And so depression and loneliness is now, there's a recent study that basically said that it was the #1 killer, even besides heart attack and cancer, that loneliness. Yeah, like loneliness is such a profound factor in a person's longevity. And so, and these communities are, a lot of around the world are just very tightly knit, and they just spend so much time together. They're not isolated like we are in the US. I barely know my neighbors. And so, and I wish they were all more friendly. I would totally hang out. So maybe I need to make the effort. But so those, all of those factors play into health, and it's not just the diet. So, and so I want to be clear that I don't think just the diet is the answer, but the diet's a huge piece, right? It's a huge component. And we know that the junk food diet, the high meat and dairy diet are contributors to disease by far. But your attitude, your outlook on life, your social connections, like all of those things are so powerful for your health that, I think that's why we see a lot of people drinking and smoking and eating like crap, and they live to be their 90s. A lot of them are really pretty positive kind of people, right? And they just have, one easy example for me is my grandfather, who lived to be 100, and he never worried about anything, right? He wasn't overweight. right? But he never worried about his diet. He just kind of ate just a modest diet and didn't eat much meat or dairy, frankly. He ate mostly plant food, but not out of any kind of idea. It's just, he just had a few servings of meat a week kind of thing. But he was working, he was even snow skiing up until he turned 90.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, lived in Vermont, just stayed active, had a little farm, had some horses.
Wait,
was
that's
just
the
always out
secret.
there.
That's the secret. Lived in Vermont. There you go. You just gave it away.
Yeah, I live in Vermont. There it is. Right. No, that's in the paid course.
Sorry.
I'm going to tell them the secret in the paid course.
Sorry, Chris.
It's Vermont.
Sorry.
But he also worked in a lumber yard literally until he was like 95. Right. So he's like working in a lumber yard, like picking up the 2x4s and helping somebody get them in their truck or whatever. And so, he stayed active. He was outside, sunshine, fresh air, and, maintained a trim weight. But he also he wasn't negative. He didn't complain. He wasn't a worrier. He just kind of, just let things go. And that's sort of like a perfect sort of almost archetypal Blue Zones type of guy.
Yeah.
Was my grandfather.
Except maybe in the Blue Zones, they had access to maybe more pure food or, and that, but I really want to echo the same, Chris. Laurentine, my wife, her grandmother passed away at 103 years of age, lived at home unassisted with a visitor 3 times a week to help out, but not full time until 101. Basically ate a mixture of foods, lots of plants, but would have a glass of wine or sherry or something once a day. But her mental attitude and approach to life was unprecedented. I mean, she would wake up and pray for mostly the first hour or two. And she would be like in Dutch, thank you to God. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to exist. And to all the things that I have in my life. And then she'd go outside and make a tea from the garden and take all these herbs and make the tea. And I interviewed her briefly and I said, what's your secret? She says, well, I always drink all of my tea before I have any alcohol in the afternoon. And I'm just like, but it just goes to show that the food is important. And yes, we should have a strict focus on that. But if you're angry, upset, anxious, worrying about things you can't control, this is what you're saying, right? This is one of the key elements of these people.
Yeah, being an angry vegan will not help you in terms of longevity.
Yeah. So what?
It won't.
So in your studies and I guess in the evolution of your health journey, and we meet at big conferences, we see people speak on all the intricacies of this supplement, and you got to get into this blood glucose level, and you got to get this, and then immediately you're like, wait, no, we have to just eat real foods, mostly plants, be outside, fresh air, exercise, but most importantly, work on our mindset. I mean, I agree with you, and the big component of the film that we're working on, which you're in and a star of the show, is about this concept of we really underestimate how powerful we are. So how are you cultivating that in your life now? I mean, what have you changed in terms of, I don't know, how you wake up, how you brush your teeth, what you say to yourself in front of the mirror? I mean, what are you doing now, Chris, to try emulate some of these lessons that you're learning?
Yeah, that's great. So cancer taught me a lot of things, right? And one of the first things it taught me was how most of the stuff I cared about doesn't matter. Right? Most of the stuff in the world, in my life, did not matter at all. Like, all I cared about was getting well, right? Like, there's only a couple of things I care about: getting well and my wife. And then we had a little baby girl about a year after I was diagnosed, and then I started caring about her a lot, right? But keeping the bills paid. But you just like the bare essentials. So I learned in a very sort of hyper intense seminar of life that I learned how to be grateful, right, in the midst of the storm, right? How to exercise gratitude when my life was kind of sucked, things were sucky, and I was in a situation I didn't want to be in, right? But I learned how to be happy and choose happiness and exercise gratitude, and I shifted my focus, and I think this is probably the biggest, most important lesson of gratitude and happiness and everything is just shifting your focus from your problems, right? Shifting it off your problems and shifting it to your blessings, right? I mean, it's so simple, but we spend so much time fixating on things we don't like, people we don't like, stuff that bothers us, problems we have, right? And that's all negative. That raises your stress hormones and puts you in a stressful state. And if you just catch yourself and you shift and focus on, well, wait a second, like, why am I getting upset about this? Like, I am so blessed, like, to live in a country where I'm free, right? To have a wife who loves me, to have a baby girl that, like, this beautiful little baby girl in my arms, like, to have food and water and a little money in the bank, like, that I'm not past due on my bills, and so I just started, like, they call it counting your blessings, right? And I just started, like, counting my, like, just like Laurentine's grandmother, like, just saying thank you, like, thank you, God, for my wife. Thank you for my health. Like, and I was thanking him in advance for my health. I was like, thank you for my health and my healing. Like, I was projecting into the future. And that's the practice that I still do now. Like, believe me, I'm still tempted to get, and there's things in the world that I see that piss me off, no doubt, right? Especially anybody promoting the paleo diet, yeah, or the ketogenic diet. But you know what I'm saying? There's stuff that, like, really irritates me, gets under my skin, and then people are always going to screw you over. They're always going to disappoint you and let you down, And so anytime I'm confronted with the negative stuff, I'm gotten pretty good, not perfect, but I've gotten pretty good at, like, the emotion comes up and I catch it and I'm like, you know what? I don't have to, like, entertain this emotion. I don't have to entertain anger or bitterness or resentment or prejudice, right? I don't have to think that way. Let me just choose to think this way and choose to think the best about people and just take it back to my life. And one thing that I remind myself of, this actually occurred to me a day or two ago. I was, like, walking around in my grass, earthing,
as you do.
Walking around in the front yard, like, just kind of thinking. But it reminded two things. One is I had an epiphany when I was talking to one of my daughters. One of my daughters was complaining, and she was probably like 5, and she was complaining about something completely, like, that had just something stupid, right? Like complaining about something on her plate for dinner, or, it's just something that, like, and it actually, like, made me mad, right? Because like, right. And so I scolded her, but what I said ended up being, I feel like, pretty profound. And I said, you have 1,000 things to be happy about. Pick one.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And as soon as it came out, I was like, man, wow, that's pretty good. Like, and it's true. Like, and it's like what I can say to myself, like, you've got 1,000 things to be happy about. Pick one. Like, quit feeling sorry for yourself and wallowing in self-pity and all this stuff. So that I love to share that. And then the thing that I thought of the other day that I haven't shared publicly, is that I went to Cambodia a few years ago. In fact, this shirt says Cambodia.
I didn't
expect to be talking about Cambodia. And while I was there, it was sort of like a medical mission trip. But while I was there, we went to an orphanage of AIDS orphans. Okay. And there's 130 kids in this orphanage that my friend started. And these kids have nothing. They have no parents. They have no possessions, and they have AIDS, right? And all I have to do is remember that, and it completely changes my whole, my day, my moment, like, my attitude. Everything changes if I can just remember that one thing. Like, there are kids right now in an orphanage in Cambodia with AIDS. Like, what the hell do I have to complain about?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's powerful, man. And that's the secret to gratitude. Like, so I just have to kind of whip myself into shape sometimes when I start to go down the negative path of thought.
Well, Chris, I mean, this is incredibly enlightening, and I think that you've taken this conversation deep and beyond just plants, which is awesome. And I think that that's the story. And I want to share something personal. I'd like for you to finish on this sort of thought. With my father's transformation, which was the catalyst for the Food Matters documentary, and everything we've been doing the last sort of 10 years plus, was really food became a transformative process for him, but that helped him move to a higher level of awareness as a human. And now, fast forward 10 years, he's going to chanting retreats, doing meditation, deep diving into really understanding more about who he is, but also developing a greater sense of gratitude for his existence and even for the illness that he had and how that helped open him up. So what message do you have for people that are maybe going through some tough times? Maybe they're okay and they just need a little bit of a reset in terms of how powerful food can be, but also, do you think it's a great gateway, not to like, you know how we normally use gateway in terms of a bad thing. This drug's a gateway to that drug. But I think food is a gateway to some sense of enlightenment. And especially I see it in you now, like what you talk about now is a somewhat spiritual idea, which is that we are a lot more powerful than we think. Do you think food has that power to help us get to that place faster?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, you know, the one thing I love about the raw food diet, and it's the reason that aside from the physiological benefits, right? Like if we just set that aside, the power of the raw food diet for someone is it's so radical, right? It's such a massive shift that when you get somebody to go from a standard American Western food diet, whatever they're eating, to a raw food diet, something shifts in their brain and they realize, wow, if I can do this, what else can I do? Right. And it's like your dad, right? He's gone on this whole journey of like, oh, well, I made these changes and this happened. And like, what else can I change in my life? How else can I improve and how else can I grow? And so many of us get stuck in a loop, right? And that loop just becomes a rut. Like we're going around and around doing the same things, exercising the same bad habits, negative thinking, all this stuff. And we just end up stuck in this place in life where we're not getting anywhere. And then when you break out of it with a radical diet change, you feel better, you lose weight, like chronic disease resolves, like all these wonderful things start happening. And yeah, that is the gateway or the catalyst to it, to new things and growing and becoming a different or better person. The other thing that I think is so important for someone that's in a difficult situation, right now, is to understand or try to understand that problems come into life. Let me say it a different way. Opportunities come into your life disguised as problems. And obstacles come into your path with the intention of basically doing two things for you. Either they force you to climb and overcome the obstacle, right? And that makes you better, it makes you stronger, it makes you wiser, right? Or they divert you onto a completely new path, right, in life. And that's, for me, that's what it was, right? Like the obstacle, cancer, bam, in my path, can't keep going the way I'm going, completely diverted me on a new path. And now looking back, I'm so glad that happened. I didn't like it, right? But I'm a much better person now. My life is so much richer, and I've been able to, just encourage and inspire and empower and help other people actually heal their own cancers because of what I, had to go through with my own. So like, I completely understand this idea that, and I try to help others understand that like problems turn into blessings. The good thing becomes a bad thing, but you have to like take this mindset that this is going to become something good, right? So like, and even now, like when something bad happens to me, I've gotten pretty good at this kind of thinking too. Something bad happens, I catch it right in the moment. I go, something better is right around the corner. This is setting me up for blessing. Like this is setting me up for blessing. And I'll even say, thank you. Like, thank you. You just set me up for a blessing. It's coming, right? And man, I'm telling you how thinking this way is so powerful. Like somebody stole my hubcaps, like it was like 5 years ago or something. Like I was eating dinner at a restaurant, like come out, like my hubcaps are gone. Like what? And so, at first I'm like pissed, and then I just had, I was already in this mentality, and I was like, you know what? This person set me up for a blessing. There's a blessing coming. And so I want to encourage anybody watching this, like next time anyone screws you over, hurts you, or whatever they do, like instead of letting that anger and bitterness and resentment like fester and take you over, forgive them. Like just say, you know what, I forgive them, let it go, and say, you know what, I'm glad this happened. Something better is coming. This is setting me up for a blessing.
Beautiful. Chris, you are a consummate professional. The way you are able to articulate this message and make it simple for people to understand is your gift to the world. And, I really admire the work you do. And if people are interested in finding out more about Chris's work, I mean, he's going to be in our third documentary, which is coming out soon. So can't wait for you to see that too, Chris. I mean, that's going to be fun. He's also got a great program called Square One about coaching people through their cancer transformation, a fantastic course. And if you're on the Food Matters community, we share when he's opening that course up on a regular basis. And I believe you're still working on more things. You can find out more at chrisbeatcancer.com. Chris, thanks for your time today. Always a pleasure chatting. And I'm a huge champion of your message and everything that you stand for. So well done.
Thank you, James. It's been fun.
Cool.